Did I do it right? Did I join as a panelist or attendee?
Commissioner Sauer, you had joined as an attendee. We'll have to work on what's going on and why you're not coming in as a panelist. So we'll see what's going on our end for that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Chair Jackson, we are running live right now and we're also recording and you have a quorum so you can start the meeting.
Very good, thank you. Welcome everyone to the September meeting of the Commission on Equity. We have a quorum and we shall proceed with our agenda. That first item being its approval. May I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda as it is right now.
Very good. Is there a second?
I second.
Agenda, excuse me.
The agenda has been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. What about the meeting minutes of July 26th?
Commissioner Jackson, just a real quick point of order. Do you want to take a vote on the agenda?
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Those in favor of the agenda as moved and seconded, please say aye.
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 No. Agenda approved. Thank you for that reminder. Now, the meeting minutes of July 26th. Is there a motion?
This is Commissioner Brown. I move that we approve the minutes from the August meeting.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second.
It's been moved and seconded that the August minutes of the August meeting be approved. Any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Meeting minutes of August approved. Thank you. Is there anyone joining us this evening that would like to address us as a member of the public? Assistant Manager, do you see any hands? Do we have anyone present?
Chair Jackson, there are no hands raised at this time.
Do we have any members of the public who's joined our meeting that you can see?
Chair Jackson, it looks at this point, there are no members of the public.
Oh, thank you. Is there anyone joining us by phone?
Chair Jackson, there's nobody on by phone.
Thank you. Seeing none and hearing none, we close public comments for today's meeting. We'd like to welcome our Youth Council member, Alanis. Is she on board?
Yes, I am present.
Oh, there she is. Hello there.
Hi, nice to meet you guys.
Welcome, welcome to the Commission on Equity for Lacey.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
Wonderful.
So
Shannon,
Chair Jackson, just
might you
really
have an
quick-
introduction for us?
I
Yeah.
do, yes, sorry. So just really quickly to remind the commission that this is the third year that the city of Lacey is running the Lacey Youth Council. And one of the big changes that we made from year 2 to year 3 was having our youth council members serve as the youth representatives on several boards and commissions here for the city. In the past, there were youth representatives, but they weren't filled by the Lacey Youth Council members. So we're very excited to have youth council members be a part of the Commission on Equity, as well as the Board of Park Commissioners, the Historical Commission, and the Library Board. The youth council members selected the representatives for the boards, and the youth council selected Alanis Blackburn to be the representative for the Lacey Youth Council here on the Commission on Equity. And Alanis Blackburn, it'd be great to have an introduction. Tell us a little bit about the high school that you go to, about yourself, and your interest in the Commission on Equity.
Okay, my name is Alanis Blackburn. As you've heard before, I am 16 years old and I'm a junior at River Ridge High School. I've lived here in Lacey all my life. I know it like the back of my hand, so I'm really looking forward to providing my input and experience and knowledge of the city to our community equity. For labor, I have my own hairstyling business called Lanny's Locks. As you can see on my own head, I participate in the African braiding styles and serving the Black community in that way as well. And it's been amazing to hear similar stories as mine and very different stories too, and hearing a lot of women of color, life stories and where they stand regarding Lacey Washington and our journey. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to providing you guys with a youth representative for the third time, right? And yeah, making a difference. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, Alanis, my grandson is a freshman at River Ridge, so look after him now. Take care of him.
My daughter's a junior there. Welcome aboard.
Very
Sounds
good.
Try to hunt them down. I'm also a running start student for SPSCC, hoping to receive my AA by the time I graduate with my high school diploma as well. So I only have one algebra class at River Ridge High School. So I'm not really around, at lunch to see everybody, but hopefully I get to meet them.
Great.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, again, welcome. And we look forward to having that youthful voice in the various discussions that we'll be embarking upon in the months to come. So we are so pleased to have you join us. And thank you for being present tonight. And thank you, Shannon. Anything of Atlantis anyone would like to ask while she has the floor for a minute? Otherwise, then we'll go into our inspirational item, which is new to our agenda. And Commissioner Hart is going to lead us in that. Marquita?
Hi, this is Commissioner Hart. Welcome to everybody. And I have actually a poem by one of my favorite poets, Maya Angelou. It's entitled Human Family. I note the obvious differences in the human family. Some of us are serious, some thrive on comedy. Some declare their lives are lived as true profundity, and others claim that they really live the real life. The variety of our skin tones can confuse, bemuse, delight, brown and pink and beige and purple, tan and blue and white. I've sailed upon the 7 seas and stopped in every land. I've seen the wonders of the world, not yet one common man. I know 10,000 women called Jane and Mary Jane, but I've not seen any two who really are the same. Mirror twins are different, although features jive, and others think quite different thoughts while lying side by side. We love and lose in China, we weep on England's moors, and laugh and moan in Guinea, and thrive on Spanish shores. We seek success in Finland, and born and die in Maine. In minor ways we differ, in major we're the same. I note the obvious differences because each sort the type, but we are more alike, my friends, than we are unalike. We are more alike, my friends, than we are unalike. We are more alike, my friends, than we are unalike.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. And I don't think Annie is on the call tonight. Am I right? She was supposed to be in South Africa. So Annie brought that to us. But thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Hart.
You're welcome.
Any comments? Very good. Then we'll go into our business items, and that's 5A, and that's going to be led by Shannon.
Well, good evening, commissioners. I'm going to let in Marianne Hardy, who is our Director of Human Resources, and Leilani Jensen, who is our Employee Relations and Compensation Manager, as well as our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Coordinator. So just a brief reminder for the commission. At the past meetings, I mentioned that we were going to start bringing in representatives from various city departments to provide a very high level overview of what those departments do for the city. And tonight we're going to start that with our Human Resources Department. So not only are they going to provide that high level overview of what they do for the city, they're also here to provide a very high level overview of some of the internal diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts that the city is actively involved in. And this is to help provide the Commission on Equity get a more holistic view of all of the DEI efforts that are ongoing at the City of Lacey, as this commission continues to work on creating opportunities for a more welcoming community, continuing critical conversations on race and equity, increasing participation from underrepresented community members, and identifying existing gaps and barriers which could prevent full participation in government and public policy. So with that, I am extremely happy to introduce and excited to introduce two rock stars here at the city. So Marianne Harvey, who is the Human Resources Director, and Leilani Jensen, who is the Employee Relations and Compensation Manager, as well as the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Coordinator.
Thank you, Shannon. Appreciate that warm welcome, and good evening, Commission. Thank you very much for having us. We're looking forward to this presentation, and we hope you'll find it'll be very helpful and interesting. So just wanted to talk a little bit about what our department handles, the program areas of responsibility. We handle recruitment and selection, employee relations and investigations. We do labor relations, which is contract administration and negotiations. We have 4 collective bargaining agreements for employee groups. We also, a component, of course, is diversity, equity, and inclusion. We handle risk management and loss control, wellness programs, personnel policy development and implementation, employee training and organizational development, classification and compensation, employee benefits and leave administration, compliance with and legislative review of current employment law, safety and emergency management and preparedness, claims administration for city liability, workers' compensation, and unemployment insurance. We have a total of 7 members on our staff. We have myself, Leilani, who's the Employee Relations and Compensation Manager, and also our DE&I coordinator, 2 senior HR analysts, 1 human resources analyst, a human resources specialist, and an emergency management and safety coordinator. And so with that, I'm very delighted to have Leilani now share with you the presentation that she has prepared for tonight. Thank you, Leilani.
Well, hi and welcome. I believe I've had the pleasure of meeting Thelma on one of our interview panels, and now Clifton and John Hedgewood too, I think, assisted us with our police chief recruitment. So nice to see everybody, and at least John's name. And nice to meet the rest of our commission. Looking forward to meeting Annie, and I think I see we also have a Christine who's not here with us. So I don't know that I've met her as well. So looking forward to that. Anyway, let me switch over to our presentation. Let me just make sure that this is going to be working. Can everybody see my screen?
Not yet.
Okay. Let me back out of this for just a second and see if I need to first share on screen 1. Okay. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Excellent. It's always up for grabs with technology and me, so thanks for your patience. So we're going to talk a little bit about the current efforts that we have here at the city, and then some of the future initiatives that we'll be working towards. So first of all, we just wanted to share with you our value statement, which really just captures what we are trying to do in HR from the time we interact with community members that are applying for our positions, that are going through the recruitment process, up until they become our employees, and the efforts that we make in the DE&I arena for improving our workforce culture in this space, and hoping to improve retention of our employees with these efforts. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the breakdown areas here. And most of our discussion will be around what we're doing to reduce barriers in this area of work. And then we'll talk a little bit about future initiatives. Okay. Okay. So some of you may be familiar with some of these pictures if you were helping us out with our recent police chief recruitment. But one of the ways that our team has been working in the last few years to improve our candidate search. So on the front end, searching for those community members who are going to come join us here at the city, is to advertise about not just those technical skills or maybe the education requirements if we have to have them, but really focusing on the person, that those ideal traits that a candidate might bring to us at the city. We focus in on the culture of the department we're hiring into, and above all, we're focusing on the community that we need these people to serve. So we're really trying to work on inclusion, work on expanding our outreach efforts to a more diversified pool, and just really improving the advertisements that we're sending out. So this is just an example, a couple of snippets from our brochure that we created for our police chief. On the recruitment and outreach effort, I want to talk a little bit about, we have a very, very large list of different platforms, different listservs, different contacts that we send our jobs to. And I'm going to pull up a few here that we're adding to on a weekly basis, looking for ways to, again, get our reach out there for a more diversified candidate pool. And if you have any contacts in the community, any nonprofits, any sort of platform that you think might be willing to showcase our job openings, please feel free to email me those ideas, because we're always looking to add. And this is not an exhaustive list that I have highlighted. These are just some of the ones. I think we have like a 4 or 5 page document list of the different platforms and listservs and contacts that we reach out to, but definitely we're interested in learning more about your connections. So if you have any, please feel free to email those to me directly, and I can make sure that you have my email address if you don't have it already at the end of the presentation. Okay, so let me switch over here. All right, so back to some other areas that we're focusing on to reduce the barriers. So we're working on website content, and this is just kind of one of those inclusion efforts. There are different ways that you can put text, use color, that are going to be more inclusive to folks who maybe are colorblind, or maybe use a reader to access information on websites. So we're trying to make sure that our information that we're providing about our departments, the jobs that we have, is accessible. So that's one thing that we're focusing on. Another new thing that we just sort of tapped into is the platform that we use, NeoGov, to advertise all of our jobs. Has a new diversity health function that kind of runs in the background that helps collect data if you want to turn this function on. So what we did is we looked at the 2010 census numbers for the city of Lacey and the different race categories that they had available. And we looked at what our current HR system race categories were, just to sort of get a ballpark idea of what we looked like in comparison at a snapshot. So this table right here just represents what our figures in our workforce in March were in comparison with the census categories for Lacey. And how we use this diversity health is we can set the metrics so that they tell us or alert us if we have maybe an underrepresented number for one of our race categorical groups. So for the census, for example, in the Asian Pacific Islander category for Lacey, it said in the 2010 census, we had 9.6% of our population reporting. So we can set our metrics in the background to say, we want about 9.6% of our candidate pools, ideally, to represent or self-report in this race category. So it will at least just inform us, how good we're doing on our outreach efforts, what sort of self-reported race categories are coming through our recruitments, just to kind of get a gauge of, are we reaching out to those groups? And if we're losing candidates in groups at certain points, this data also sort of tells us where we might be losing those folks. If it's the interview process, if it's the reference check, background check, that sort of thing. But overall, when we looked at our numbers in March, it's pretty close to what the census categories were. Now, 2020 census numbers are coming out soon. So we'll be looking at that and sort of updating our back end metrics, but this is just another area that we're focusing on. Okay. Some other things that we're doing, we're taking a look at job descriptions, education, certifications. We sort of know anecdotally that there is a systematic inequity in those systems. And so where we can and where it sort of makes sense for what we need walking in the door for someone to be successful, if we don't need that education that may have been something that people are accessing in an equitable way, we don't want to perpetuate that by saying, unless you have a bachelor's degree, you can't work here. Unless you have a certification, you can't work here. A good example for another area is driver's license. I have a good friend who works for Department of Transportation as their reasonable accommodation coordinator, and he cannot get a driver's license because he's self-disclosed, epileptic, can't get issued a driver's license, but can make it to work on time. Regular, reliable attendance is not a problem for him, but he would not have been able to get that job had a driver's license been a required certification for that particular role. So where we can, again, if we can take a look at those qualifications that we're asking for, those certifications, unless it's something they need in order to be successful, we're trying to make some options, which may, again, sort of open us up for being more inclusive to our community members. And then cover letters and resumes. Those are two items that historically we've required for all positions, no matter what type of work we were hiring for. So we're taking a look at that as well, because most folks, again, with that equitable access, have access to smartphones. And if you've ever tried to upload a document from your smartphone onto an application, it is not the easiest thing. And sometimes it's just not possible to do. And so in order for folks to apply to our jobs, if we had those requirements, they would need access to a desktop computer. So, unless they were going to a public library or they had their own PC or desktop, they were, basically being barred from applying. So we're looking again at where it makes sense. Public Works Journey Level Technician, great example of a job where a resume and a cover letter is not going to tell me a whole lot about whether or not they're going to do that job well. Skills assessment tests, the interview itself, and maybe a written once they're here would probably tell us a lot more about whether they were the best candidate for the job. So again, reducing barriers where we can, where it makes sense. Any questions as we're going along, by the way? If you have a question, feel free to either virtually raise your hand or physically raise your hand, and Shannon can call on you. Oh, yes, sir.
A question, do you use LinkedIn profiles at all?
We have started that. So in the last couple of months, we have started posting all of our jobs to the City of Lacey platform, which I think is ran out of Shannon's shop for public affairs. So we just link our positions onto there, and Vanessa Medford, our HR specialist, she's in charge of our outreach efforts. So she's been diligently shifting all of those postings onto that platform. And for those of us like me that are on LinkedIn quite often, we're also sharing out to our network. So please, if you are on LinkedIn, feel free to share those postings to your network, which will help us, reach more people, hopefully.
Great. And I have a list of community contacts that I can share with you as well.
Excellent.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank
We would love to compare lists. Okay. So a couple of more barriers that we've been working on. We want a more diverse lens when it comes to evaluating candidates. As Thelma and Cliff and John are aware, we are pulling in sometimes our community stakeholders to our processes in order to find the best candidate. We do the same sort of thing internally. When it comes to hiring panels, we're trying to pull different folks from different departments with different perspectives to help us pick the best candidate. We're also, our team here in HR works with our hiring managers to make sure that we're asking the same questions equitably across the candidate pools that are being brought in for interviews, as well as making sure that those questions are legally defensible. Couple of other items. We are working on job announcements that aren't all about the technical skill, but rather reflecting the cultural competency that we're trying to hire, that we're trying to bring in. We definitely want to be more inviting. We want folks to see that, we're not as focused on the technical. It's a balance between that technical skill and maybe that customer service, that ability to communicate to diverse audiences. So we're taking a look at different ways that we can showcase that in our advertising. We're also making our onboarding process an electronic process, which I have a sister who has severe spina bifida. She's a supported employee. And for her, going in person, especially during COVID, but going in person is a little bit more difficult to navigate with her schedule. So having an electronic onboard process also helps us be a little bit more inclusive for those folks that maybe have a harder time with schedules. It's easier for them to interact over, electronic platform, even if we weren't in COVID. So these are just some of the things that we're thinking about. And then equity for pay is another area that we have put in some checks and balances in our internal processes. We're making sure that our hiring managers not only consult with us in HR before they're placing folks with salary, but we're also making sure that we're tracking those for compliance with the Equal Pay Act, and making sure that we're, not asking questions like, how much are you currently making when we're making those decisions? So it's really about what do they bring to the table? What kind of education and experience do they have coming in the door? A few other things that we're doing for non-discrimination in our hiring processes. And some of this we mentioned a little bit before, but we're redacting personally identifiable information. For those of you that participated in our panel interviews, I don't even think that you got to see much of, if anything, of those application materials. But if you did, you would have noted it was redacted heavily. And this is just simply because there's a lot of information out there about unconscious bias and the biases that you bring to the table, whether you want to or not, when you're reviewing information about people. And so seeing people's names, where they went to school, where they currently live, can sometimes trigger those unconscious biases. So we're removing that information to help our panelists be even more objective about their hiring. We're doing training. So I've worked with Marianne to develop some unconscious bias training for our interview panel members internally. They have to go through this training before they can participate on a panel. And this is really just to give them some things to think of, run through, to help them be sure that they're checking their bias at the door before they come in as a panelist. We're standardizing the process with the universal scoring tool for interviews. This is very new for the city. I think maybe the last couple of months we've been running this, and it's sort of an ongoing update that we've been getting feedback from our departments, kind of tweaking the scoring tool. But again, it's a great leveler of the playing field. We found some pretty good success with using this. Yeah, we're really excited about that tool. We do skills assessment tests, like I said, for some positions. Resume cover letter doesn't make sense, but for skills assessment tests like digging a sign, putting in a pothole was probably a more useful skill for us to know if you have. And then the last thing is we're maintaining documentation to reflect our objective process.
Ms. Jensen, Commissioner Sauer has a question.
Yes.
Hi, thank you. So going back to the hiring barriers, I'm just wondering what kind of a consideration are given to people with immigrant background, where there's some of the experiences and qualifications from overseas, may not necessarily meet certification or, credential here. And also for those with like ESL, the writing skill will be quite not compatible. So I don't know if there's any kind of consideration or if you have any plans to be equitable.
Sure. Well, there's two parts to your question. One, I think, is maybe some folks come over with an H-1B visa, working visa, in order to apply to our positions. We have requirements to be in compliance with the federal government. We have an I-9 form that's required. So in order to work for any of our positions, first you have to have that certification coming the door to say, yes, I have a working visa, or I have, US citizenship. For H-1B visas, I came from a very, very scientific heavy agency. And I know from that agency, which is Department of Ecology, even for us in that sort of environment, it was difficult for us to justify which positions, how many positions could we bring in for H-1B visa, because there's also another federal requirement that you have to basically prove, I don't have a qualified candidate pool for this position, which, is here and they're US citizen based. So that's difficult to do unless it's, again, one of those niche positions. Typically IT or science are the ones that we would get approved. Marianne, do we have any of those positions here at Lacey? I've only been here for about 8 months, so I haven't delved into that enough, but I know at Ecology, we probably only had 8 or 9 and we had 1,600 employees.
No, not the H-1B visa.
Okay. So, I mean, that is something to consider if we ever have a need for a niche position that we can demonstrate. We've opened for recruitment. There is no candidate pool. And so, maybe to fill it, we contract out, and often that's how we would find our H-1B visa applicants through Ecology, is when we went to contract. Those niche areas of technology, the people they had to contract with us were on an H-1B visa. And then eventually some of those folks hired on permanent, but there's a sponsorship requirement there. Definitely something to keep in mind for us, though, if we have those types of positions. And then the other thing is ESL. So that is near and dear to my heart. Just so you know, my spouse is Samoan and his first language is Samoan. So I often am asked to edit his communications for him. But certainly we do have some positions, I think, where we definitely want to bring in folks with, bilingual, trilingual skill sets, particularly like, for example, our utility billing counter. And I think we have a position open right now. Ideally, we do have somebody who's got those bilingual skills. They definitely have to, be able to navigate communications here at the city in order to perform their job in English, because the majority of our communications are in English, but we do have a customer base that they would serve well if they had those skills. And our police department, that's another department where it's a very sought after skill set to have that bilingual skill set. So, if people have questions about that, our recruiters are definitely open to have those conversations. If you have connections in the community, Kim, that want to reach out and ask questions about a job, whether or not they qualify, we're all definitely willing to talk to community members about that. We've done informational interviews. So yeah, our contact information is out on our city website for all of our HR staff. Feel free to hand that out and we would definitely have those conversations. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I'm sure there's no easy, one that you can just switch it and everything's, equal and equitable. So thank you. Thank you.
Yes. The other area too, I will mention that we are making efforts on, and this might be redundant for later, but I'll tell you now, is not everybody understands technology well. I am guilty of that myself. And I know that for some folks, getting on our NeoGov platform file is a barrier. They're not really sure, like, how much do I fill out? What do I need to put here? What does that particular question really mean? And so Vanessa Medford, our HR specialist, and I, we're working on focusing on our high school students, because this is one area where we have positions in the summer, like our part-time parks, recreation aides, our aquatic staff. We're just not seeing a lot of our young people come through. And part of it, I think, is they just either don't have access to create the profile, one, or they don't really know that that's what they need to do. So we're going to make some connections with Timberline, with River Ridge, and see if we can kind of virtually get in front of their senior class and any of their juniors that are in.
Is the commission still there?
Yep.
Okay, unfortunately, we have this thing called the curse of the corner with our connection here sometimes at work. So it sounds like Leilani's connection might be frozen. She's actually next door. So I'm going to see if she wants to come over. She's got the presentation on her screen. So if you hold on just a moment, I'll go see if I can get her.
Well, I can confirm that City Hall is not out like our first meeting. So hopefully we'll be able to get Ms. Jensen back up here in just a second.
Sorry about that, Commission. She is reconnecting. Speaking of technology. So while she is connecting, I can go ahead and pick it up. Let me see if I can. Let's see. Let's see, I think we're on this one. Hold on. For some reason, it's not coming up. I hear the door opening.
My network connections died.
Okay, that's okay. You can bring it up over here on my connection.
Okay. Let me get mine.
One moment.
It's just really annoying.
I can't get it to get off the screen. Like it won't show it in the slideshow.
Oh,
You go on these tabs, like, you know what I mean? I don't know what the deal is, but it's not bringing it up. See,
oh no.
see, okay, let's see. So this is where it's at, right?
Yeah.
And then maybe I share screen and see if you can pull it.
Okay. Let's see if this works. All right. Can everybody see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I apologize because I stayed at City Hall just so I would have good connection, and apparently that is not the way our connection works. All right, so let's go to. Okay. Here we go.
I love it. City managers.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to try to be fast because who knows how long my connection will last here in Mary Ann's office. So a couple other things that we're working on for our current employees once we've brought them on board is focusing on employee development and training, particularly in building foundational knowledge for our employees around what diversity is, what equity is, what inclusion is. So we had a compliance foundational training on diversity in the workplace, for example, that we rolled out to our employees earlier this year. And coming up in October, we're really excited to bring in a training to do a 2-day session on implicit bias, which will really help even more so dive deep into, you know, the science behind how we build our lenses and what sort of stereotypes and blind spots we each have developed over time through our life experience. We're also working on ways to coach our supervisors, because our supervisors have arguably the most impact on our workforce, making sure that they're thinking about you know, ways to equitably offer training opportunities to make sure that they are including all of their staff where they can, and fostering that idea of, you know, lean and process improvement, making this a culture where people feel respected and they feel valued, which inherently helps people bring their authentic self to work and helps all the rest of us be inclusive of that authenticity. We're doing some compliance trainings, which I know not as many people are excited about, unless you're in HR, of course, around ethics in government, things like anti-harassment, anti-discrimination. We did that training earlier again this year, and we have ethics scheduled for first quarter of 2022. And then we'll be working on scheduling some additional trainings to follow implicit bias, an example being like microaggressions in the workplace and what that can do to your workplace culture. Okay. Couple other things we're working on, again, with that lens of equity and inclusion for our workforce. Policies. Internal policies are a great area where you can be inequitable and not keep in mind all of the different groups and ideas and thoughts. So even going through the process of updating our manual, we have asked for a lot of stakeholder input internally. We're going through a union review, which is also more internal stakeholders and lenses. And then we'll be providing some training on that once that's all finalized. We'll be working with our city manager on a DE&I plan. We're still forming that. Marianne and Scott Spence will be the leaders of that. Performance management is another area where we're trying to make sure, again, we're offering those equitable training opportunities, that we're succession planning in a way that, you know, takes into account everybody in our workforce if we can, and offers those things up. Granted, not everybody, you know, wants to come in and climb ladders, but we definitely want to make sure that we are not the ones that are creating barriers to our employees. All right, and data collection, love data. So some of the things that we're doing besides the NeoGov diversity health that I mentioned before, we also have to report every odd year to the federal EEOC. There's a report, the EEO4 report, that we have to file, which is just about the workforce and the demographics that we have represented here. We also have some metrics that are reported to us from our public safety testing, and it's a totally separate agency that we run our recruits through, but they send us diversity health metrics for us to consider for our commissioned officer positions. Okay, so the last 3 slides is really just another way for us to snapshot what are the things that we're working on and what are some of the ongoing initiatives that are just going to kind of be in place for strategy. And this is sort of like a repeat of what I was talking about mostly from earlier. One thing that I didn't mention before, which you'll see is not implemented, is on our future bucket list is to work on incorporating inclusion principles into job announcements and recruitment material, which again is sort of massaging those qualifications, looking for ways to widen that candidate net. In training plans is a great way to do this, and we don't use that yet here, but I'm going to steal that idea from the state, which basically gives somebody graduating just from college for certain positions a way to learn on the job and have a path and plan to get to a higher level classification that they may not have been able to apply to if we were just to advertise it straight out. So an example would be requires a degree and 3 years of experience. We would create a plan that would give them those 3 years of experience on the job, working them towards the end goal as an example. And again, just creating more opportunities for community members, you know, that might not have had it before. Hiring strategies. These are, again, some of the things we've implemented that I talked about earlier. 2 of the ones that we don't yet have implemented are noted there at the top. We're working on getting a better understanding of the work that's being done, and hiring managers are the best ones to pick their brains on that. But it helps us sort of delve into, like, what are the competencies that you really have to have walking in the door, and are we articulating that well in our announcements? Because sometimes you get lost in the technical jargon and you kind of need to talk more like about a person. So this is more of that people-focused advertisement. And then providing more training on using diversity, equity, and inclusion lens to our hiring managers who write these job descriptions, which hopefully will help us even further refine the way that we're you know, writing the job description as a whole, or providing that tier of classifications. And the last one is our training and retention strategies. As I mentioned, some of these trainings we've already rolled out this year. We're exploring other trainings through different venues for compliance, for developing on our foundational knowledge. And we're also working more with supervisors and managers. We don't currently have a robust coaching program for our supervisors and managers. So we're trying to start to roll in some trainings, and Marianne and I will be working on looking for either a process that other cities are using that's successful, or developing our own tailored to the city of Lacey, that will help just further enrich our management staff in the next few years. Okay, and with that, I made it to the end without losing my network connection. So if you have any other questions, please feel free to ask. And I can stop my share here. No questions. Excellent. Well,
I was wondering if you happen to have a tentative date on when you might have the numbers in regards to what our representation looks like on the city staff for demographics once those census numbers are released.
so the last time I checked the Office of Financial Management website, which is where I go for all of my census workforce data statistics, they still didn't have the 2020 census data posted, and I think they were supposed to have it posted. Yes, Ms. Shannon.
Yeah, I'll just add on to that. It looks like November 30th is when they're anticipating to release the full data set. There is some preliminary data that's available right now, but the full data set is still forthcoming.
Okay, yep, perfect. So as soon as we have that, I am pretty confident that our city manager will be asking us to do that comparison. So, you know, at that point, he can probably let Shannon know, like, when we have those tables available for comparison, like the original table that I had earlier in the slide deck, and we can probably share that out again.
Awesome, thanks.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, if you don't have any further questions, I can mute myself now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That takes us then to item 5B, our Strategic Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Plan Workshop number 2. Tevin, are you there?
Hello, everyone. I am here.
Welcome.
Good to be back. All right. So I'm going to be clicking through some pages on my side, so that might take a second. And then, Shannon, just real quick, can I get a time check? What time do I have until?
So it is 6:20, so approximately an hour or so. So that would take us to 7:20, 7:30-ish.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for that. All right. So I just want to do a quick check-in with everyone. A little bit different order than our first meeting, that this check-in would usually come in at the beginning. But if we could just do a quick round robin for everyone. How are you showing up to this space today? Do you have any access needs? And I can go first and I'll popcorn it over to someone. So again, the end of the day is, you know, my brain is usually not as sharp as it is at 8 a.m. after a cup of coffee, but I'm feeling pretty good. And I don't have any access needs right now. So all my access needs are met. And I will pass it over to Kim.
I had a great weekend. It was way too short and quick, but I am ready for the week and ready to start the week. And it's a great way to start learning about DEI. Oh, I don't have access need. I will pick John.
Hello, everyone. I'm feeling great coming to this. I'm in a great space with no access issues. I will pick our vice chair.
Thank you, Cliff here. And today is another wonderful day for a relatively new retiree. I did sleep in this morning until about 7:30. So I'm getting lazy, you know. So, you know, I'm full of energy this time of day. You know, I'm not tired from a long slog during the day. So I do have a project that I'm working on with my wife in the kitchen. So that's my challenge for the week. I have no access needs at this time. And let's go with Alanis.
Hello, everyone. I am feeling pretty decent today. I'm looking forward to this meeting. However, I have been suffering from a slight body ache just from all my physical activity I've been participating in the past week. A lot has been going on. So I've just been taking a slight break, staying home and doing homework. And here I am with no access issues. And I will pass it to the beautiful Thelma.
Well, thank you. Access isn't a problem today, and I'm thankful for that. And I'm in pretty good shape. I've enjoyed the rain that we've eventually gotten, and it's just a godsend given how dry we'd become around here. So for the end of the day, I'm in pretty good shape. Thank you. Who do we have left? I think that's it, Tevin.
Makita, did we hear from Makita yet?
Oh, that's right, Makita. She's the one. It's Anna and Christina that's not with us.
Yeah, so no access issues. Thinking about the week ahead, I've got a lot on my plate, a lot going on, but I am just going to take it day by day, which is what I usually do. And especially when I feel like I have a lot going on, just have to remember to chunk it down and remind myself to chunk it down, because I am a Virgo and we overthink everything. So just the daily reminders to chunk it down, take it a day at a time, project at a time. But other than that, I'm doing pretty good. And I actually wanted to throw it over to Shannon, because I'd love to hear if she's doing all good.
Well, thank you. I'm doing fantastic at this point in time, and I have no access issues.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. And Makita, does that mean that you had a birthday recently or coming up?
Yes, my birthday was the 7th, but I'm a part of a pitch competition. So, kind of doing that's coming up in next month, and some other things with my business. So it's a little overwhelming, but we're going to get through it.
Nice. Well, happy belated to you and any other, Virgo birthdays, Virgo babies out there. Okay, so let's jump on in then. So first, I want to thank everyone for completing the anonymous survey. Based on the feedback, I want to do a bit more of a deep dive into this process that we're in right now. I'm going to quickly recap some points from our first meeting, where we kind of highlighted that we're in the process of creating equity values, a mission, a vision that will be adopted by, or we hope will be adopted by, city government. So with that, I want to also clarify a little bit about what my role is. So my role is to listen, to help guide, to support the Commission on Equity with forming recommendations that will culminate in a set of values or statements and a strategic plan for the City of Lacey to adopt, to guide their action as they work to integrate more DEI into everything. So together we plan community processes and engagement, but that is specific to what we're doing, in the creation of the vision and values. Beyond that, though, there's also community engagement that's happening with this committee, and that we will recommend to the city that they should do some more, find partnerships to do that. And so I really wanted to take a moment to kind of clarify if there's any, if that would be helpful for anyone, and also to answer any questions about what it is that, maybe I'm here to do, what it is that we as a group will provide as a presentation for city government. Say, hey, here's what we've come up with. We've done the listening, we've done the learning. Can you please adopt this set of things? And just to kind of answer any questions that folks may have at this point. Yes.
I have a concern, and I've raised it before, that as we go through our process and our work, and I know others in the city are engaged in similar kinds of activities? How do we interact? How do we interlock? How do we make sure that we as an equity commission aren't working in isolation, which often happens in equity kinds of work? That's my concern, so that when we do come down to our strategic plan, with other strategic plans also being worked on, and they're all feeding into Lacey's strategic plan, where's the overlap and the overlay? That's my concern.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that. So what I imagine we will end up doing at some point, either within this process or the COE within other processes that are ongoing, other conversations, is collecting information on what is working, what has been working in the past. And something that we didn't really close our first meeting was, where have we been? What are we up to, right? We covered a little bit of that today. I was here for the HR presentation, which is great. And so there's work that has been done. I also did some research on the Charter for Compassion initiative that was kind of I think it's a couple years ago that was happening in City of Lacey. And so there's going to be, I think, within the strategic plan, a need to capture some of that activity that's still ongoing, just like HR has their own equity plan. Maybe an element in the final strategic plan is, hey, how about all departments have something similar to that? How about all departments are working on something? And then that department is actually much further along than maybe another one is, just depending on where folks are at. But incorporating those into the plan altogether, I think is where we're going to find out, how we're tracking, how everyone else is tracking, how far along we're going towards those goals. And I see Shannon has a question or comment.
Yeah, more of a comment. Thank you for the space. So Chair Jackson, just to go back to the question that you had, I think you summarized it very well during our last meeting with the word infusion. And so, one thing as we're working towards this plan, ultimately what we hope and intend for this body to do as programs and policies are, being developed and reviewed by the city to be able to take, the elements that are made through the strategic plan and being able to apply them and bringing items, policies, for example, before the board for review, looking at the strategic plan, the diversity strategic plan, and how they overlay and infuse with those policies and programs moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for that additional there too, Shannon. And one thing I note is in the last presentation, that department that was presenting has an equity values statement, which I think is really great. And have we adopted one at the city level yet? Not quite yet. And so this is why, as other departments are developing, if there's a overarching equity standpoint, like, hey, here's where our equity values are at this high level, it makes it much easier for any new work to just easily align with what's already been established. And so hoping that that's a little bit more clear now, because some of the results show that maybe that needed a little bit more explaining. Okay, great. Did anyone else have any questions or comments, any feedback at all about exactly kind of what we're up to here? And also, it might not all be clear at this very moment, but hopefully, by maybe meeting 3 or 4, we have even more certainty. But feel free to share now or share later. Okay. So I do want to kind of talk a little bit about some of the really great feedback that was provided in the anonymous survey. I'm not sure if everyone's provided the kind of list of documents, but I can screen share and I have them open. Okay, I'll just go ahead and do that. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, don't pay attention to all the tabs on the top. So this is just a high level, some highlights that I thought were really great. Question 17, in addition to the responses provided, is there anything you'd like to share about your lived experience on this journey to advance a more equitable and just society through your work as a commissioner? And, we highlight that there's a lot of great, there was a lot of great feedback here around people and communication and awakening and community. I want to further highlight, there are folks that are interested in to what extent systemic racism and lack of inclusion exist in Lacey, which is very important. And this is, other topics that folks here are interested in for future DEI initiatives. Other additions that people wanted to make was about their experience. The fact that some people feel that there is no problem of racism or discrimination. And this endeavor feels like it's new and is something spurred on that's more emergent. And I believe there is definitely some unpacking that we could do there. I will say, in addition to that, I do notice that in more recent times, folks, I think, are realizing that silence does not equal disagreement. And so if folks are disagreeing with some things that they see happening in their communities, they can't just be silent on it and say, well, I'm in disagreement with that, but I'm not going to say anything about it or do anything about it. And I think there's a bit of that right now, is folks saying like, hey, I'm picking a side. I'm saying what I do stand for. I'm being clear on my values so folks know, where in the past, maybe that wasn't the case. Folks expecting to gain perspective on DI other than what they've learned or been trained around to date. How to create and implement a strategic plan. So many great ideas came out of the surveys, and a lot of these ideas we're going to use, and we're going to take those when we start to build the elements of the strategic plan. So, the strategies, how are we going to strategize to get there? What types of things will we be interested in looking at? And some of those points that were made in the survey is like, hey, let's absolutely look at food insecurity. Let's look at maybe what diversity looks like at different departments, and kind of figure out what goals we want to set for those. And lastly, folks expect to gain some clear ideas and understanding around the mission, the goals, and the objectives of this commission. So that, I think, is really vital, and it was great to hear that. And hopefully that's what we're gonna get to here. So I'm just gonna switch back here. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what folks had come up with. Some of the, I don't call it homework, I'll call it pre-work, that we had discussed at the end of last meeting was, what does equity mean to me? What does it mean to this city? And the reason why I think this question is important is because what I'm going to share today is a draft equity values statement. It is to be discussed, it is to be updated, it is to be changed if we need it to be. It's fluid. But I do want to ask if folks had time. I know maybe some folks didn't have time to do that, but if you're comfortable sharing, what did you prepare, if you prepared anything, or if something's more inspirational, you can just add it now. And I see Shannon has a hand up.
Just another comment to follow up on what Mr. Medley just said. He mentioned that we're going to be reviewing and looking at a draft equity statement. And this is, as he said, a fluid process. I mean, this is workshop 2 out of 10. We're going to continue to dive into details. The commission has already expressed that they have an interest in really getting the community engaged and involved in the work that the commission is looking at. So I just want to reiterate that, this is a draft. It's going to be a draft when we look at it today, when we edit it, and it'll remain in draft form so we can continue to get input and responses from the community, as well as other experiences that might occur between now and when ultimately, as Mr. Medley mentioned, the idea is to bring it in front of the council on a future date when the workshops are complete for approval and adoption.
Yeah, thanks so much for that. So if anyone did want to share, what does equity in your own words, mean to you? There was a list of values, and so I'm wondering if any of those stood out, and then any ideas that folks wanted to share about what it could mean or what it does mean to the city of Lacey. I see Alanis has a hand up.
To me, equity is a very complex idea, right? So we think of equality and, what does that word stem from? Equal, right? Equity is equality, but in a more diverse form, right? So let's take an example that I use as the game Monopoly, right? If we're playing Monopoly together and I'm like, or the banker's like, okay, you start off with $200 and then everybody else starts off with $5 and then we'll see who wins. Is that a fair game? Or is it really equal or equitable? It's not, right? Because they're starting from the top and they're remaining at the top and only getting bigger, yet the people at the bottom are remaining there, and it's a slower process for them, right? So equity is not necessarily having people on the same pedestal, but it's adjusting that pedestal for the people that started at the bottom and need to get to the top in order to be equal with everybody else. So in order to have equality, you must have equity first. And I feel like that's an element that people sort of miss. In equity, they kind of assume that that's the same thing, when in reality, you are adjusting to the circumstances, not necessarily applying the same circumstance to everyone.
Thanks for that. Any other thoughts?
Well, it's interesting.
Go ahead.
It's interesting that we've shifted from the use of the word equal and equality to equity. And it's taken a lot of people some time to try to make that adjustment. And Elena just did a terrific example of how that plays itself out. And when we talk about an equity commission or a city attempting to become more equitable, it causes some different kind of thinking to have to take place when you're trying to be more inclusive and more equitable for your population. What does that mean? What kind of changes are involved? What kind of policies must we shift? What must we do differently if we want an equitable outcome as opposed to an equal outcome? And that's a lot of hard work. It is a very complex issue. And that's where the work lies.
Yeah, and I look at it from an opportunity standpoint. If you take 5 entry level employees, and 5 years later, did they all have the opportunity to learn, grow, develop, promote, increase their salaries? Or were some privy to information, some that others were not? Were some privy to mentorship when others weren't? Did we communicate to them all the same information and afford them the opportunity to learn, grow, and develop, equally, based on their own desires and their own work ethic? Or did we move some forward because of other reasons, connectivity, more access to information, mentors, those types of things?
So this is Kim. So far, what's been shared, I agree, and that equality or equity is not a simple but a complex issue, because I try to answer that question to myself and it's just taking very long time and I'm still unclear. Especially, I can definitely understand systematic discrimination where there hasn't been a equitable access, equitable opportunity. I can definitely understand that. So with that being said, I'm also try to, answer my own question about individuals' ability. There's just, Clifton talked about opportunity, right? You get opportunities and so forth. But what I see over and over is that some people they kind of earn that opportunity because perhaps they are working harder, or they have ability that I don't have. I mean, they are chosen for some other projects and so forth because they're able to do that. I compared to me, I don't have that ability and so forth. So I don't know, maybe I need to look at different angle where we don't look at things in equally, but as an individual, that everybody have a different contribution that they can make, and that obviously outcome will be different, right? Some people will be awarded more financially or different ways. I don't know. I think it's complex. I don't have an easy answer, but I struggle to find some answers.
Did anyone else want to contribute? Yep, go ahead, Shannon.
So I received emails from Commissioner Stolberg and Commissioner Clay. So I just wanted to provide their input as far as the 5 values are concerned for them. So Commissioner Stolberg communicated that her 5 values are improvement, courtesy, diversity, making a difference, and thoughtfulness. And Commissioner Stolberg may try to join us, but as of right now, she hasn't, but I'll leave it there. So hopefully she can fill in a little bit more information on that. For Commissioner Clay, she provided the top 5 would be accountability, community, compassion, fairness, and freedom.
I see Alanis has a hand up.
Adding on to what Shannon said as well, I would like to share my 5 favorites from the list provided. And the most important ones to me were clear-mindedness, helping society, self-actualization, truth-seeking, and making a difference.
Yes, I'll share mine, as well. And they were creativity, making a difference, openness, results-oriented, and truth-seeking.
I can toss in my 5 to add to the list. I had commitment, effectiveness, making a difference, results-oriented, and strategic.
I'll toss in my 5. They were thoughtfulness, growth, commitment, creativity, and independence.
Suppose I'll share mine also. Mine are accountability, belonging, humility, self-actualization, and understanding. I actually was looking for integrity or a synonym of integrity, and I didn't quite find one, but I think several of those together incorporate that value as well.
That's great. And something I find important to point out about this process is in truth seeking and in some of those other word choices that people had. There's a level to this where what I've seen maybe in other initiatives is folks have an understanding that there's something different about other people, their situations, and they say, it's important that I help others. It's important that we help communities that are not doing great. And from my perspective, equity is really about not just seeing that someone's not doing great, but actually getting to that truth seeking. And what is it that was the first cause? What is it that is the deeper root behind what we might see is a symptom of something else, something more systemic maybe. And that's one thing that I noticed is a big shift from, we're going to help folks that need the help. It's like, how about we address the reason why folks need help to begin with? And I think that is echoed within all of what was shared today. So that's great. And then just keeping an eye on time, there was I had planned today, so we're gonna take a look at the equity statement that I prepared, and we're going to be critical, and we're going to read through it and see how we feel about it. This statement, along with the others that we're going to create, along with the strategic plan, is what we can take to the community and say, hey, this is what we worked on. Here's where we landed on this. Did we get it right? As folks in this group are part of the community, this is work that is being led by the right people. So we're going to do that. But prior to doing that, I just want to jump into some of the definitions. I feel that they're very related to what is in the statement. And then does anyone have any questions thus far on what that will be? And I'll screen share here in just a moment. Okay, cool. Let's see. Okay. So one thing I really wanted to tease out, and something that I don't think we can ever talk too much about, is implicit versus explicit bias. And I know folks can read here, so I'm not going to read through all of it, but I do want to provide just a kind of a couple examples from my own, history story. So bias is judgment, right? Where someone's making a judgment. They either know they're making the judgment and making it, or they just don't know they're making that judgment, or they tend to make that same kind of judgment time and time again. So if they just don't know it, it's something they do, they don't know. That's implicit bias, right? So if I tell a story about, 10 amazing pilots, and, the room assumes that I'm talking about 10 men, that is something implicit. It's not that maybe I intentionally think that all pilots have to be men. It's just something that my brain may just lean towards, and that's not something that I'm conscious about, as an example. Explicit bias is the opposite of that. I've already made a determination, and I am being biased based on something that is in my mind. And a great example I have for this one is years ago, I used to work when I was doing my undergrad at Starbucks at Arizona State University. And I had a manager there who just had this idea that I, the one that looked different amongst the rest of the staff, would be able to pick a lock for her and could get into rooms that were locked already, and didn't, that wasn't something that was implicit. So that was something that, we never had a conversation about before. And maybe for this person, it was very understood that, something about this person means that they can break into a room. So it was, hey, can you just break into this room really quick kind of request. And so that's more explicit, that's conscious. That was a decision that was made. So those are two big differences there. A note on inclusion, and then these will be provided later as well. Inclusion is a direction that I think is much better to move towards beyond diversity, because if we are inclusive, we'll naturally become more diverse. There's a lot of contradictions in a lot of spaces around inclusion. So for example, if, let's say I am a CEO and I say, we value inclusion, folks that might be transgender, we value them as well. However, inside my facility, I only have binary restrooms for people to use. That does not correlate to that value of inclusion. We value recent mothers. We have no room for a place for a recent mother to breastfeed. It's not very inclusive. So inclusion it needs to be coupled with the things that actually produce or support people to participate. So it's about participation. Do we actually set it up for participation? We believe in, another example, maybe religious freedom in the workplace, and maybe we provide a prayer room because that's what we said that we are about, and that provides a space for people to participate. So just some examples there. Privilege is talked about in our equity statement, and here's just a short list. Again, this isn't exhaustive. This, as a reminder, comes from the Office of Financial Management, Washington State, and their list is phenomenal, but it is not, the end all be all of concepts and theories. It has a lot of really great resources. So here's just a short list there to look over. So what I want to do next, let's see, quick time check. What I want to do next is to pause and ask if anyone had anything to add, what they heard so far, what they've seen so far, before we take a look at the equity values draft. Okay.
Yes, I have a question quickly before you leave that.
Yes.
I was too short here. For this list of examples of privilege, is that in any particular order or is it alphabetical? Or it seems to be alphabetical, not in order of prevalence, right?
That's what I'm thinking as well, right? And beyond this list, I can think of a lot of other what I call identity markers, or what are known as identity markers, that do also can create privilege. If we talk, well, these are some, but there's more. So I'm sure that all of us could think of additional ones that could be added there.
Okay.
I wanted to ask you a comment about, subconscious and unconscious bias. Speaking from a youth perspective, I have experienced a lot of my colleagues or classmates or even friends who, say these kinds of biasly racist things towards me or my fellow African American or friends of color. And like you said, the lady was just, it was a conscious bias because she said it, and something about you just had her entitled to the fact that you could pick a lock, right? Well, in a youth's position, most often that bias is subconscious because they are taught that from a level of authority, right? So for example, within myself, before the age of 12, I had never met somebody who wasn't homophobic. All I knew was homophobia. That's all I knew. I didn't know any better. And so that I hadn't even met somebody that was from the LGBTQIA community. And from that point on, that ideology is all I truly knew. Therefore, any bias that I had towards that community was more subconscious because I wasn't even able to form my own conscious opinion, being that was the only societal perspective I had known of, right? So when I was able to form out into the world and meet amazing people and learn amazing things, I was able to learn and teach others and grow as an ally, right? Now that I have my own conscious bias. So I was just wanted to add on to that from a youth perspective. Most oftentimes when we come to conclusions at a young age, it stems from our home or it stems from a person of authority who told us that, until we learn consciously for ourselves.
Thank you so much for making that addition.
Great example.
Yeah, and you touch on something that also I should have covered. I didn't cover it just yet, but this prejudice here, and I think there is something to that maybe something folks here have noticed before, but prejudice being an opinion that's formed but not based on fact or logic or an actual experience. Someone had a negative experience once and now associates that experience with every other experience that they might encounter, which is a little bit different from implicit explicit bias, but it's just not based in logic or fact, and that is where we get a lot of stereotypes from that are prevalent, and there's plenty that we already know of, but thank you for that. And this is kind of a really brief overview of what all this is, and we're going to see how this plays into the actual equity statement when we get there. And then any other comments or input before we move on?
Mr. Medley?
Yes, Shannon.
Thank you. I was just gonna to say too, as we're looking at this, and before we jump into the draft equity statement, Just if you could provide maybe the group with some more background on, I guess, just generally equity statements, some examples of equity statements that you've seen previously, and then also just kind of the connection with the values, that we were just discussing and, forming and shaping the equity statement moving forward.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I do have that as a page to share. So one thing that I wanted to do and something I created is examples of other equity statements, right? And so what I think that's going to be helpful for this group in doing is understanding, to put it bluntly, how bold we can and should be, right? When we are up against, centuries of unequal systems, inequitable outcomes, it takes being bold. What I've seen in the past and what folks have transitioned from is maybe language that's like, hey, we need to be, better towards our neighbors. And I don't feel like being better towards our neighbors captures anything tangible. So we want to, an inequity statement, create tangible, concrete, clear, communicate clear values. What do we stand for? So that it leaves nothing to the imagination. So not just being good towards people, but saying like, hey, no, there's a real problem here, and we plan to address the problem in these ways, or some iteration of that. And so thank you again, Shannon, because I I don't want to miss that page. So I'm going to screen share again, and we can just take a quick look at some of those. Oh, I see two hands. Go ahead, Shannon.
I'll defer to Commissioner Blackburn first.
Another thing I wanted to add is that I think honestly that we should kind of tap into their imagination, in the sense of that most ignorance lies in the fact that people haven't experienced what we've experienced, right? So they don't know, right? They could easily say racism doesn't exist because they've never experienced it. It's that simple, right? So if we were able to incorporate into a statement some emotional knowledge that has them thinking, oh, imagine if I went through that. Imagine if my son or my daughter had to experience that at school, or walking down the street with a pack of Skittles in their pocket. You know what I'm saying? Kind of that sort of imagination in order to get them to release that ignorance and be like, what if that happened to me? I can't imagine that. That's horrible. So kind of getting them to feel some sort of way in regards to how important equity is, and imagining that circumstance for anybody in their circle could be another goal to contribute to our draft in order to get people to be moved by it.
Thank you for that.
So Mr. Medley just, unpacked the idea of the equity statement, and then we'll get to some examples here. I just wanted to take a pause and just to check in with the Commission on Equity to see if they had any thoughts, questions, concerns, comments that they wanted to before we moved on and took a look at some examples.
I'm willing to let the process work and respond or react later.
Great, that sounds great. And so I'm going to screen share here really quickly. And one thing I also want to note about these equity examples is, and something that Alanis touched on is, outcomes are hard to tie back to certain factors, right? And because inequity and inequality is so systemic, it's not easily seen. Like, we can't just put a finger on it like, hey, it's this one thing right here. We definitely can see it. But we have statistics, we have data, we have feedback from folks to show us what's really going on in our communities. And so with that, I'm going to share my screen with a few examples, and I'll try to scroll through here, make it big enough. Okay, so the first example is from a neighboring city. And let me know if everyone can see that, or if I should make it bigger. common element for equity statements is to really describe who we're here to serve, who we're here to think about, who are these marginalized groups, who is, who are these people, where are they? And typically every equity statement will have some clear definition. Of course, it's impossible to list all different identity markers, and so what will usually happen is folks will select very specific identity markers that we know historically have been marginalized. And then I'll move on.
I have a question.
Mhm.
How do we go from reading that equity value statement? Because what I'm looking at here and thinking about last summer and some of the reaction from last summer being as though, like take up the homeless encampment. A lot of people are upset about that right now. How do we take this equity value statement and we're doing the right thing and doing what needs to be done to be compassionate and try and help and all of that. But how do we take that and make it seem as though or not even make it seem as though, but to the outsider that's not a part of DSHS might be seeing it as though we're letting them, build away and letting them get away with this, that, and the other. How do you, I don't know. I don't know how to even put that into words, but we're trying to go this way, but on the outside, people on the outside are seeing it a totally different way and seeing it as though, people are getting away with this, that, or the other.
Yeah, and I don't know that any, organization that does, any entity that does adopt an equity statement will always get it right. What I do know, though, is at least having some kind of guardrails, at least having some kind of direction for a lot of these entities has been helpful. So maybe in the past, decisions were made quickly without consideration for different factors. So if there's at least some kind of blueprint in place that at a high level is being encourage, like, hey, everyone who deals with us know that this is the kind of values that we stand for. Here's what we encourage in our communities and in our work. I think it reduces harm. If harm will ever reach zero, I don't know about that. But I do think it is maybe our best attempt as, fellow humans to do right by other people.
That is true. And loving like the very first paragraph that's right there, or after the our commitment, maybe even putting in something that says that this is a living document and it's, subject to not subject to change, but to be better, as time goes on. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Having those examples and having these examples, having these examples is really great. So when we look at ours, we can say, hey, there's elements we would definitely love to see incorporated, and we can get a new iteration pumped out there. And I have a couple more examples, unless anyone wanted to chime in, and I can scroll through, or we can, if you want to add, you can add now. Okay. So one thing I'd like to add about this statement in particular is, from my perspective, it does seem like not only is this related to equity, but it also ties tightly to the mission. And so as we talk through a mission statement or a vision statement, it's not maybe necessarily that we're going to have three different statements. Well, we will. However, we might combine them into, one format, one piece of text, like, how they talk about it's their commitment to academic attainment for every student is part of their mission, right? The mission of their work is to do X. And so I note that that's a little bit different from what we might see. And also it depends on the entity that is producing these. And I'll scroll forward unless anyone has input or. Okay. And I'll scroll to the last example here. Yes.
As I look at these examples that you shared with us, there's one concept that seems to be missing out of all of them, and that's how do we affect outcomes? We can put a different environment in place, we can change a mindset, we can shift policies, but what we're really looking for is a different outcome for people. And so I don't see the concept of outcome from an economic point of view and that kind of thing. When you began your presentation, you were talking about some of the underlying causes of some of the things that lead to the inequities. Well, if we are to deal with the inequities, then the concept of outcomes has got to be in there. And all four of these examples that we just looked at, I'm missing the concept of outcomes. How are we changing the outcomes? You take, for instance, the one on education, where it's going to make sure that opportunities are present for students. Well, you can't even measure opportunities. There's no metrics for that. But you've still got an achievement gap that is measurable through test scores and other metrics. So the outcome is an important concept to me as we talk about equity and going from inequity to equity. And what have we changed that's impacting people's lives so that there's some equality coming about at some point. And so with everyone now dealing with this equity thing, it seems like they're putting so much into the feel good as opposed to, what must systematically be done differently so that the outcome is changed. And
Absolutely.
so outcome is a concept I see missing in all four of these.
Yeah, and I will note that these were specifically equity statements. And so what I often see is that they're paired with maybe mission and vision, as this body will go over what we would hope to see in the future and what steps we think and the community thinks will get folks there. Outcomes are definitely something we want to think about. And it may be something that goes into the equity statement. It may be something that goes into the vision statement. These are all things that we're going to co-create together over the next few sessions. But that's a great point, great observation.
To add on to Ms. Jackson's claim, I just wanted to say, in order to also add on to the outcome, you also have to say the how, right? So I see a lot of, we're going to be anti-racist, we're going to, involve equality and equity, and we're going to hold ourselves accountable, but how, right? We're going to be we're going to end discrimination in our schools by, we're going to become more inclusive for all students in all areas by doing what? You know what I'm saying? So I feel like that's something that we could also add into our statement that we're missing from theirs, is the how they're going to achieve all these things. They're saying we're going to do this, we're going to do that, but how does that incorporate into education or housing or families or whatever project these paragraphs are describing?
Mhm. Absolutely. Thanks for that. Okay, well, I'm going to switch over to our draft statement really quickly. And just to know, also to kind of piggyback on that, our version of how is by strategic planning. And that's what this group will be working on, is saying, hey, we actually have goals we would like to see, goals that we would like to see met. It's not going to be this body that is going to do the work to do that, but they're going to collect the data, the information, and present that to the city. And the city will say, well, either we can do it, or we can partner with someone, or we're going to figure out what to do with this, what's been suggested and recommended. Just to reiterate that. Go ahead, Shannon.
Yeah, just to add on to what Mr. Medley was saying is, as far as the city and what city and outcomes can be produced driven. The city is an entity. The city can control a lot of organizational wide things. They can also partner with a lot of entities and organizations and individuals out in the greater community and beyond. And it can also act in a capacity to be a champion. So there are different roles that can be played by the entity. And that's something that we're going to continue to look at and explore as we move on through this process. And that was something, that was brought up during the first workshop when looking at the exercise we did with city policies and city involvement, just to realize that it is multifaceted. And there are several, different hats that the city might be involved in throughout different times and decisions processes.
Thanks for that. Any questions before we take a quick look at the draft statement? Okay, I'm gonna screen share. And I'll give everyone a couple moments just to read through it, and just feel free to chime in. So I imagine what will be produced at the end of all of this process is a request, right? The Commission on Equity recommends City Council, or some iteration of this language, to adopt the following that will not just include an equity statement, but will include all the statements that we produce, as well as a strategic plan. And then at that point, they will, take a look at that and make a decision. But here's what we've drafted thus far, and I'm taking notes. So if folks want to chime in on what they think, feel free.
So question really quick, is Black included in people of color? Why is a Black by itself out of people of color?
That's a really great question. So one thing that I think is important to highlight is the experience of Black families and Black individuals is distinctly different from other experiences of people of different races, including Indigenous people. And so I think that's why it's important to call that out. Black and Indigenous and other people of color have, sometimes similar outcomes, but some of those groups actually experience those disproportionate negative impacts at a much greater level than all other groups. So if we are being equitable, we do need to address that and say it clearly and plainly and make sure that that's known and why we're doing that. And I hope that answers your question a little bit.
Okay.
We could change it to Black, Indigenous, and other people of color instead of people of color, because then we're combining both perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
Well, BIPOC has become a, pretty common acronym that is used. I don't know the origin of it, but that is, kind of universally known now. So it's just as you have it there, Black, Indigenous, and people of color.
Yeah, and it's really interesting how language changes over time, right? There was a time when, people were using maybe, African American was something that was the preferred term. And then people said, well, why is Black a negative thing? We could just say Black people. Some people are very comfortable with it. Some people are not. Indigenous people, there was a time when people said Native American people. you know, acknowledging that people's identities are very tied to their experience and their culture and their lineage. And so I think BIPOC was born out of that need to be as politically correct as possible, but also to not negate the experiences of those individuals who have had the highest marginalization in their lives, and not just their lives, but generationally in the lives of the people that came before them in their lineage.
I think as we talk about, you know, equity and this work we're going to be engaged in, that what we're talking about now becomes very, very important, because we can't forget how we got here to this point. How's everybody drafting equity statements and all of these things to start with? And it's because history caught up with us as a country, as a society. And you're absolutely right, Tevin, when we talk about the disproportionality in the inequities and who has suffered the most. And if we're going to factually deal with this, then, you know, it is, as we're talking about, you know, with that BIPOC acronym that's evolved. But we're here because of finally casting some illumination on just how this country was founded, how this country has existed, and the kinds of things that must change if this country is to be about equity, freedom, justice, equality, and all those kinds of rosy terms we like to talk about. As a country, we run around the world talking about inhumane treatment, but we won't come to grips with how much of that exists right here in this country. And so, you know, we got to be honest with ourselves.
In my reading of this, this looks as if it's an equity statement for the city of Lacey. I thought we were looking at a statement for the commission.
Thank you so much for that question. And I'm really happy for it because I wanted to make sure that this was very clear. So the commission is wonderful and brilliant, and the commission is not going to be the ones to go out and do this work, right? So the city is asking the commission, hey, folks here, can you please, you know, do the research, find out what is needed, and present us with some ideas, present us with maybe, in this case, mission values. What should we adopt to help move this work forward? And certainly to your point, Commissioner Jackson, is we don't want this to lose steam, this newfound momentum, and strategic planning is a great way, especially if it's set for the next 5 years, to make sure that doesn't happen. So again, the equity statement is not for the Commission on Equity. This body is part of planning that and getting input from the community and then providing it. Go ahead, Shannon.
Just yeah, to add on to that too, you know, it's part of providing the you know, the strategic understanding of what is, you know, the Commission on Equity charged with doing, and you know, how is it going to infuse with other, you know, policy decisions that are moving forward to provide that background and setting. And Commissioner Brown, I'm just you know, wondering if you had any follow-up comments or questions on what Mr. Medley said.
No, well, I understand it now that it is for the city of Lacey, but, you know, I just thought we would, maybe at some point as we're building a strategic plan, that we drill down to the role the commission plays. Here are the goals, here are the objectives of the commission, what we as commissioners will be doing to impact change in the community.
Absolutely. The commission, I am going to advocate be a part of the strategic plan. It has to be that way, right? So in, you know, these recommendations to the city, we say, hey, this commission on equity continues their work and builds their work and grows their work, and that's part of a strategic plan. We're at a very interesting position in the planning process to have that foresight to say this work is important for the future, and also we are the ones that will produce what that future might look like and ask that the city adopt it.
If that draft statement could be sent out, I have to read things and kind of absorb it and you know, really look at it, just to glance it for the first time and then to, you know, give the input on it and then we move on. That might be the case, but I would still like to have that where I can read it again and look at it again. So when we revisit it the next time, I have a little better opportunity to respond to it.
And Chair
Yes,
Jackson, nope. And Chair Jackson, we can certainly send this out. And I just want to reiterate what I said before of, you know, it's a draft now. And as we go through this process, it stays as a draft. So all of the information that is, you know, collected and all of the conversations that this commission has on the commission with the community moving forward has the possibility to continue to be integrated and infused into all of these draft materials prior to making a recommendation to the city council.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, in paragraph 2, is that it appears to be in alignment with Title VII, but should we give credit to Title VII in that statement? You know, it's as prescribed in Title VII.
You know, I'm not super familiar with every detail of Title VII, but I do know that in most cases, equity statements go above and beyond what we're able to find in, you know, some of this already passed legislation, especially as it relates to gender expression or English proficiency or, you know, educational attainment. Some things are standard, but also I think some, there's definitely opportunity to go above and beyond what, you know, even other folks are thinking of. It's like, hey, we can't mention everything, but we can definitely clarify some of those points and, you know, identity markers that are experiencing a lot of, you know, compounding marginalization to this day.
Got it. Okay.
I appreciate and I feel as though that we could highlight even more the systematic parts that we face in regards to oppression and racism in the education system and the workforce and all areas of our lives. I feel like we could kind of, although we do have those incorporated, which is great, I feel like we could highlight those even more considering that we are presenting this to the exact system that incorporates those into it, not exactly now, but has in the past. I also feel like we could be a little bit more bolder too. It sounds similar in regards to a lot of the other drafts that we read. I feel like we could add a little pop and make it a little different from all the other ones.
Yeah, thanks for that feedback. So at some point, what we will do is for this group, get it to a final stage. And that final stage is what can be taken to the community to say, not just this one, but the other ones that we'll continue to work on. Hey, everyone, we've done some work on our part, on our side. Here's what we've come up with. Do you feel like you're represented in what we've created? Do you feel like this is something that you would want the city to adopt? And those are the kinds of questions and the kinds of community engagement that we have planned for this process. Yeah. So just keeping an eye on the time. We don't have a ton of time left. So again, I'll send all this out. I don't pay attention to the times here. I had those mixed up. So this is not how it went, but I'll send this out to folks, or Shannon will send this out to folks. So we talked about implicit, explicit bias, privilege. We use some of those glossary terms. Shannon, do we have enough time for a checkout or? Okay, great. So I want to end this because these spaces and these conversations are, you know, particularly heavy, and I'm just gonna stop sharing for a second. There's a lot involved in them, and I just don't like to leave things just open and a little bit raw. I like to have a little bit of closure at the end of some of these conversations, and they're just gonna, they're gonna keep getting, we're gonna go deeper and deeper as we move forward. And so as in kind of a new way to close, I wanted to see if anyone would be comfortable as a closeout to share anything you feel you gained from the conversation tonight. And that doesn't have to be necessarily just from this part. There was some presentations before this conversation, but if you want to share anything as just your closing thoughts on this process, something you feel like you gained, I think that'd be great.
Definitely feel wonderful knowing that City of Lacey has done, especially, the HR, the presentation was much appreciated. Yes, the DEI work is happening, and it's starts at HR. At least what I heard is very satisfying. I know we have way to go, but I mean, we started it, and so far the draft that I see is also very good. So I think it's pretty inclusive. More to be reviewed and studied, but I mean, so far everything's very, very good to me. And also thank you for explaining the Black and BIPOC. Hearing a little bit of background, it kind of explained to me why it's not same as just people of color. So appreciate that.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing.
To add on to that, it's just really good to see that there are people actually putting forth the effort to make a difference within our community and prejudice within it. Because before I was a part of this council, I had no idea. I didn't know that people were actually working towards this. I didn't know that voices are being heard. So it's really good to hear that and see that and be a part of that.
Also, I guess to echo the last two speakers, I was also pleasantly surprised to see what Leilani was doing in the HR department. She's doing great things, which isn't really that much of a surprise given my previous work with her. She is definitely on top of things of that nature. So it just kind of follows naturally that she incorporates that in her line of work as well. But to actually see her plan in action being acted on was great, and definitely reassuring that we're kind of all moving in the same direction together. Tevin, I also really appreciate the work that you've done to kind of lay out some of the example statements for us that are from other local organizations for us to kind of compare and contrast, and then also bringing it with our draft statement to kind of give us some context when looking at that, even though it's for the first time. So that we kind of see, I guess, what it looks like there on the sea change, because we know, Lacey is, of course, the most diverse city in the county, which isn't really saying much, but we're it seems like we're definitely leading the charge on that, and I'm happy to be a part of it.
Another thing is that it feels good to see Black people in council and in these higher up positions to spread their voices and spread their perspective and history to everyone. I remember being in past positions for youth councils for my school district and like Tumwater and Lacey and just other programs attending to hear the youth perspective and make a difference. And I'll be the only Black person in the room. We'll be talking about equity. It's like, if I'm the only person who has experienced this kind of stuff, not only am I a youth representative, but all the adult representatives in the room have no Black people in that equitable position, So I just thought it was really hypocritical to be in a room talking about equity and have no Black people working in that position. So it feels good to see that finally happen as well.
Any last words? And I'm just going to share a little bit of post work, if not. Okay, so again, sorry about the post work, but this is all building on, what happens next. The workshops are designed to build one on top of the other, and this will be sent out. But I would like folks to think, next time we meet, we're going to be talking about a mission statement. So I'll create space for us to go over any feedback and updates from the equity values. And then we're going to talk about a mission statement. And so the post work will be, why is this commission important for the city of Lacey? And why is the work we are doing together important now? There's some really great language already that exists around, why the COE is important to the city of Lacey, but maybe in your own words. And then why now, of all times, why not, a year ago, why not a year from now, why now in our own words? And this is going to help us kind of conceptualize what will go in the mission. What is our mission exactly? What is the mission of the city of Lacey? What could it be? And what do we hope that they will adopt? But yeah, with that, I am complete and just also really appreciative and grateful for all the work and the energy that's been put into this, and looking forward to more.
Thank you, Tevin. Look forward to seeing you next time.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you.
That takes us to item 5C, demographics and city overview.
Thank you, Chair Jackson. So at the last Commission on Equity meeting, it was expressed a desire to have more information on the city of Lacey as far as demographics, and then also just to provide a level of overview of what the city is. And so the one thing I just want to preface really quickly before I share my screen and go through this presentation, and it's already been highlighted throughout tonight, is that a lot of the demographic information is based off of census data. And so currently we are predominantly using what's called the American Communities Survey, which is a 5-year running estimate. And we hope soon to have 2020 census data. And as I said earlier, we hope that that date is November 30th. So I do intend to come back to this commission to provide an updated demographics as soon as we get the more detailed information, which will provide data on a much smaller level, block track level moving forward. So what I'm about to present to you tonight is a very broad looking specifically at the city as a whole, but hopefully we'll be back in front of this body shortly to provide a more nuanced look on the city of Lacey. Before I dive into the presentations, any questions on what I just said about census data? Right,
I would just comment, Shannon, that in yesterday's paper, there was a leading headline story on the census. So that was just kind of the big picture, and what we're going to hear from you will be more of the detail as relates specifically to Lacey come November 30.
Yeah, so like I said, yeah, after November 30th, we'll be able to provide a much better overview, but right now we'll just provide a broad stroke just to get some understanding and come back to provide more data. So can you all see the screen that I'm sharing with you that is a presentation?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Let me just find you all again. There you go. All right, so just really quickly, so we have the city of Lacey, which has been incorporated since 1966, and you can see the actual city jurisdiction here in the green, and in the blue, this is showing the Lacey urban growth area. Now, I know we have several members from the urban growth area, but just to provide some background, the Lacey Urban Growth Area was established with the Growth Management Act, and the idea is that these growth areas would eventually be incorporated into the city that they not belong to, but are connected with. So in this case, you can see the blue areas are what is designated as the Lacey UGA. What I'll note here is this population is going to change slightly. This is actually pulling from the State Office of Financial Management. We'll look at the 2020 census data here in a second. But the thing I wanted to point out about population in addition to that is when you look at the Lacey Urban Growth Area, it is also a very large population. It's about 40,000 people within this 15.6 square miles. So this is just a real quick overview of city facilities. You can see there are a number of them ranging from treatment plants to the museum, to the community center, to the RAC library, etc. There's also a number of parks properties throughout the city, and some of them are borders with the urban growth area. You can see the Greg Cuyo Community Park, for an example. And there are about 403 developed areas and about 800 undeveloped areas left in the city. The city itself is served predominantly by North Thurston Public Schools. I do want to point out that the entire city is actually, there is an area though of the UGA that is served by the Yelm School District, but the rest of the UGA is served by the North Thurston Public School District. As far as the city council, so there are 7 council members, and 3 of them are on an election cycle for 2023, indicated right here. And then 4 of them are, 4 seats are on a 2021. As far as the management of the city, so the city falls under what is known as a council manager form of government. So what that means is that Lacey residents elect the city council. The city council then hires a city manager, and the city manager then manages all of the departments under the city. In addition, the city council also appoints boards and commissions, which you are on, a board or commission, and the board and commission's role is to advise the city council on policy decisions and program discussions that come before the city council. So just some background on our community. So I'm going to skip over this page actually and just jump right into the data right here. So this is actually showing that preliminary data set from the 2020 US Census. And this is exactly what Chair Jackson mentioned, that the Olympian just ran an article on here, was this data set. And so what we're showing here is we're showing Olympia, Lacey, Thurston County, and Washington. And so what you see in the blue here is individuals who identified on the 2020 census as being a population of 1 race, and then individuals who identified as being a population of 2 or more races. I'm realizing now that the bar graphs don't reflect what's showing here, but the actual numbers are reflective of what is being showed here. So in total, 87% in Lacey identified as being of 1 race, and then 13% identified as being 2 or more races. And we have that data, and we're able to actually break it down into a much more detailed level. And that is what this chart is actually starting to show. And again, this is all preliminary data, and we hope to have a more finalized look here in the future. But looking at the city of Lacey, it is 64% individuals who identified as white, 6% Black or African alone, and it's 1% American Indian and Alaskan Native, 9% Asian, 3% Native Hawaiian and other Pacific Islander, 5% another race, and then that 13% identified as 2 or more races. As far as ethnicity, so currently the census asks ethnicity questions regarding to being Hispanic or Latino or not Hispanic or Latino. So you see here with the breakdown, Lacey is 13% identify as Hispanic or Latino, and then 87% identify as not Hispanic or Latino. This slide provides a median income by family types. So you can see the gray is showing median income for individuals or non-family households. Let me correct that. The orange is married couples with families, and then the blue is families. And this is again, median income by family types. And I know I'm breezing by this really quickly. I will be sending out a copy of this presentation to the council in addition to the materials that were just reviewed with Mr. Medley. Educational attainment. So the blue right here is did not graduate from high school. So that's about 6%. High school or equivalent is about 20.5. Some college, no degree is 27. An associate's degree, about 12.5. Bachelor's degree, about 23%, and then a graduate or professional degree around 11%. Disability demographics. So what the number over here on the right-hand side is showing is individuals with a disability, that's the total number. And then what the bar chart is breaking down are the disabilities that the individuals selected, self-selected. And the thing just to note about this is that individuals could select multiple categories for which they fit under. And so if you add all of this up, it's not going to add to 13.4% because some individuals have selected multiple disabilities. So the last thing I just wanted to leave you all with, and again, this was just purpose was a very high level, is that the Washington Department of Health has a really great map and tool that I just want to show you really quickly. So did it show the screen change for you all?
Yes.
Perfect. So this is found on the Department of Health, and let me just refresh it really quickly so you can see the full thing. So this is the Washington Tracking Network, and it shows disparities in health across Washington by census blocks, or census tracts, excuse me. So you can zoom into Lacey and select any of these categories to get a glimpse of what are the census tracts in Lacey and how do they compare to other census tracts across the entire state. So I'm just going to provide one for an example. So you can see it has, I've selected environmental health disparities, and it takes into account all of these factors which create, didn't mean to do that. Create this ranking system, with one being, the lowest level of disparities, and then 10 being the highest level of disparities. So, this is a helpful tool for looking across the state, and then also in the future could be a helpful tool looking at also environmental disparities here in the city of Lacey. And also this is just showing the degree of which we'll have more level 2 have in November 30th when the Census Bureau releases their full data. We'll be able to look at individual tracts like this, and in some cases even block levels, to get more information on what makes up the city of Lacey and where are they located. So I know this was a really high level overview, but I do know that the commission wanted some background. So that is the end of my presentation on the city and city demographics, but I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that the commission might have.
I found it to be very helpful. I feel, that information, I'm, just looking forward to the updated information, but gosh, that just clears a lot of things up for me in my mind regarding the demographics.
Hearing nothing else on that, then we can go to 5D, the draft work plan. Shannon?
Great. Well, moving on.
I have a question real quick. So this is great. I'm just wondering, will we have data like a number of businesses owned by, and perhaps a demographic of who are the business owners, or are they immigrants, the ESL population, and something more of a detail?
It's a great question, Commissioner Sauer, and I will have to look into what is specifically asked on the census for that. I do know that there are other data sources that have some of that information, so I'll do some more research and see what might be available regarding businesses.
Great, thank you, thank you.
All right, well, moving on to the draft work plan and then community engagement session. So just a couple of things. I did update the work plan to take into account, several of the comments that were made at the last Commission on Equity meeting. And, the one thing that I heard was, we want to have a community engagement session, and we'd like to have that sometime before 2022. So I've identified that we'd potentially have that in November. And then that preceding having that community engagement session, I'm recommending, and you can see this on the draft plan, to hold a work session with the Commission on Equity to discuss, in more detail what we want to have be part of that community engagement session and how the commission wants that session to run. So my recommendation would be to hold a second meeting in October, specifically focused on working out a plan for that community engagement session, and then holding that community engagement session sometime in November. I sent out to the commission a survey to find out when might be good times in November. I didn't receive too many responses, but I did provide some tentative dates in the memo, the staff report provided to all of you. It is almost 8 o'clock. I'm tired here. So I just wanted to check in with you all to see if you would be open to having a work session to focus on the community engagement session in October, and then hosting the community engagement in November.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, I think it's very important that we have a chance to really work through some things in a work session, so that when we do meet with our public, we're organized, we're clear on what it is we're trying to find out. We're in agreement on the questions we want some response to, how we want to structure it. So I think that additional meeting in October will help us tremendously. And when I look at the dates that you had proposed, Shannon, a thought that crossed my mind, understanding how community input works, and especially when you're talking about marginalized communities that don't ordinarily show up for these kinds of things. I'd be interested in considering 2 input sessions, one during the week after 5, and then another on a Saturday afternoon. Taking into consideration people's different work scenarios, availability, and that kind of thing. But I would just toss that out there for consideration as we're talking about the listening session, and provide 2 options for people, for those who, like I said, given the date you had, one on a weekday after 5 and another one on a Saturday afternoon, so that there are options for people, and maximize the opportunity, and try and include as many people in that process as we possibly can do.
I think that sounds good.
Agree.
I know it's a lot more work on our part and possibly on staff's part, but if we truly want the kind of input that would help us as we move forward and decide our strategic actions and our strategic plan, then I think, to put that investment up front would add that much more quality to our product as a commission.
So Chair Jackson, I will send out an email with another survey for individuals to take for a date for a work session in October, and then also again for 2 sessions in November for an engagement session.
Great. And then I don't want to get ahead of your presentation, Shannon, go right ahead.
Well, Chair Jackson, I was just going to say for the draft work plan, the last elements, I did pare back the work plan for 2021, just given that we have had very long meetings here for the first couple of weeks and have been focused on the strategic plan, and will continue to do that for the next several sessions. So you'll notice on the updated work plan that there are a few items that have been pushed back into consideration for 2022.
The other comment I wanted to make on the draft work plan that you presented to us, as we talk about a work session in October, in looking at the work plan, and I mentioned this at our last meeting, we really weren't dealing with how to listen and define community needs until our January meeting. And then in February, what have communities voiced as needs and support? And somehow those seem a little, January and February's agenda seems a little late with us going to the public in November for a listening session, you know, so that we can really be keen about what to listen for, what to look for, how to interact. And I know it disrupts the other flow of things, but that just kind of jumps out at me, that the training on listening comes later than it can really benefit us, 2 months behind. So I just toss that out as we continue to update and try and make this thing work as best we can for the task that we have before. So I don't know if there's some training on listening and how to utilize what we hear from the public that would really add to what we gained. What did we learn? How do we make use of this input? Am I making any sense on that one?
Absolutely, Chair Jackson. And we can check in with Mr. Medley to see if there's an opportunity at that work session to provide the training that comes later in the workshops, or at least an abbreviated version of that for this commission prior to that engagement session.
Great, thank you.
My question is, how are we going to advertise the engagement session, you know, to maximize the amount of people, you know, to make aware of it? I mean, I'd hate to have, you know, schedule the sessions and nobody or very few arrive, or to be having too many, and I don't know. So how do we plan on putting it out to the community?
That's a great question, Commissioner Hart, and I recommend that be a topic that is picked up when we have a work session to discuss, you know, the engagement session. What would be the best practices or good practices to reach out to individuals in the community to get them to the listening session?
Yes, I think that's one of the reasons the work session in October would be very helpful to us, so we can be very intentional and deliberate about how we go about that when we take into consideration the cultural aspects of trying to reach out to groups of people who historically don't participate in these things. How must we do it differently if we want that participation and that involvement to be there? So we'll have an opportunity there and still, you know, be able to publicize come November, you know, how we go about it. But that's a very good question.
I would just like to add a point that if that's the case and we're trying to explore these different avenues, it might be to our benefit to try and schedule as early as possible in October to ensure that whatever communication deadlines that might be there for us to push it out the material, to reach out to the community. So we allow ourselves ample time to meet those once we come up with different strategies of making contact with the community.
Good point.
Chair Jackson, that's the end of my presentation.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Item 6, commissioner reports. We have 2 of our commissioners that didn't get to share when we did that at one of our meetings. And that's the purpose of Marquita and Kim being listed here. So the commissioner reports, introductions of commissioners. Marquita and Kim, tell us who you are. What interests you about this commission, and you know, what prompted you to want to be a part of it? Those are the kind of things the others of us answered that day.
Oh, Marquita, would you like to go first? Okay.
Go for it, Kim.
Sure. Well, so where do I start? I work for Liquor and Cannabis Board, and I do work with a lot of immigrant community, and especially with Korean, because I am with a Korean background. I am able to speak both language, and I've been a liaison to Korean community. So seeing, you know, what the licensees go through, and also being active in my community, I wanted to bring more awareness about kind of like civic engagement, how we change the laws and rules that affect our lives, and that we're kind of staying behind in many ways due to many barriers, like people are not familiar with civic engagement process, or people too busy, really not quite sure how to get involved. But I think that we need to be out there a little more. And person like me who speak two language and having understanding from, having a lot of friends in both community, I just see myself as someone that needs to be out there and speak for the community. So I volunteered myself, and currently I just recently finished Washington Immigrant Network, and that is a employee resource group for state of Washington. I've served the chair there. And we are just starting a nonprofit for Multicultural Service Center in South Sound, and that is with Asian Pacific Islander Coalition. So that's a little bit about me.
Thank you. Thank you. Marquita?
Hi. I'm a military spouse. My husband is retired. I'm also a business owner, so I work for myself. But one of the reasons, somebody actually sent out an advertisement about this commissioner position, and I thought it would be really important, given what we were going through last year, to be involved. But then also I started to think too with my business, because with us being military family, we've never really been around any place where we had family. And so one of the things that we did while we were stationed overseas was to create our own sense of community. When you are a military family, you are often put someplace where you're not necessarily around family, and you have to move every couple of years. And so you kind of have to adapt. And I don't think a lot of people can understand, or a lot of people don't really understand that the strain and pressure. I think with COVID, we are starting to get that understanding of what maybe a military family goes through. But that was part of it. The other portion that helped me to kind of make the decision to apply was the fact that I have older children and I have younger children. I have children that are still in high school and children that are adults. And I have children that have special needs that we're working towards getting this individual, our son, more independent. Being able to have transportation was also a need that I foresee having for him in the future, and also, having him be independent beyond what his dad and I can do for him, and not necessarily being not really a burden, but having that responsibility fall towards his siblings once the two of us are gone. Also having a child that is involved in a same-sex relationship was another thing that I wanted to kind of, not only for my own education, but to also educate and show compassion to the community, and educating myself and the whole pronoun and just all of that thing, just to kind of really educate and show a little bit of compassion is really what is needed in society today. And for everybody to kind of not think about themselves and to kind of consider others. And so that was one of many reasons that I thought it would be a great opportunity to have some activism and to show that. So that was kind of one of the reasons why I applied for this commission.
Well, thank you all for sharing. Thank you all for sharing. As time goes on, we're all going to get to know each other better. So the two of you didn't hear what the other five of us shared, and vice versa. But as time goes on, we'll have time to swap stories, get to know one another, and what motivates us all to come to this place together as a commission. Yes.
And we got the opportunity, or at least I got the opportunity to look at the replay. So I was able to listen to all of everybody's
Okay.
stories. It's really great.
Great, great. Thank you. Are there any other commissioner reports? Anything any of the commissioners want to report? I, as
Yeah.
chair, have no report. Things are going along rather smoothly. We took care of most of our business last time with the election of our vice chair and fixing the terms of office. So we're really beginning to get into the work, really beginning to get into the part of it that reaches directly to us. Anything else any commissioner would like to mention or report about? And we know we have the director report that follows.
Yes, I just wanted to share, briefly with you that I did have the opportunity to participate in the interview panel for the deputy police chief for the city of Lacey. And it was a great experience. And that kept me feel like more a part, of the community, and representing the commission was really rewarding. So now I have a taste of some of the inner workings of the city and in particular the HR department and how they conduct their interviews and selections, etc. So I just wanted to share that with the commission.
Great. Any other commissioner wants to share anything?
I just want to jump in really quick and ask if we wanted to allow space for our newest commissioner, Commissioner Blackburn, to share her story.
I think she did that pretty good in the beginning, but if she has anything else to add, Commissioner Blackburn, anything else you would like to add to help us become familiar with you?
Not anything in particular, but I would love to answer any questions you guys have for me. Another thing I wanted to add as well is Commissioner Hart, me and Zane went to both elementary and middle school together, and I lived in Madrona Park for like 5 years. So we were like neighbors for a long time.
Okay.
That's great. I was just going to ask her if she knew you.
Very good. Very good. Anything else from any commissioner? Hearing none, we'll go to our director's report.
Chair Jackson, the only, I guess, question I have for the commission is if there is a commissioner who would like to take on the October inspirational item.
Well, I was thinking Anna would be back from South Africa and she can pick up where she left off. She got us started on this, and Marquita did a great job standing in for her tonight. If no one steps forward out of the ones on the call on the meeting tonight, I think we can always resort back to Ann.
Alana's just raised her hand. Alana's just raised her hand.
Okay, I couldn't see that. Great.
I would love to hear Anne's South African story, but if she declines the offer, I would love to take it.
Wonderful, wonderful. So you will be the person who will be providing our inspirational item on the agenda for the October meeting, okay?
Sounds great. That is if
Okay.
Anne doesn't have anything awesome to say about her journey, because I would love to hear about her trip.
Well, we're probably going to hear about it anyway, but
Sounds good to me. Okay.
We'll go that route. Yes, thank you
Okay.
very much. Other than that, Shannon, is that all of your report?
Correct, Chair Jackson.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you all. Thank you all so much. Another good meeting, slightly longer, but it was very productive. So thank you all. And you can see that the next meeting is October 25th, but be on the lookout for Shannon's poll to find that October work session so that we can begin to get ready for that. And as John said, as early in October, so we have maximum time to publicize and do all of that kind of thing. So with that,
Chair Jackson, one quick thing.
Yes, sir.
I would like to move to amend the meeting minutes from last meeting. I know I missed that part for this meeting, but there is a piece that is factually incorrect that we would need to change really quick.
Okay, so we want to revisit the meeting minutes from the August meeting.
Yes, please.
Okay,
If Shannon, if you have the meeting minutes in front of you, it's item 2C under vice chair selection. It mentions that I was the one that nominated Commissioner Brown for the vice chair. That was actually Commissioner Clay, I believe.
Okay. Is that the slight correction you want to make?
Yes, everything else appears to be accurate, but yeah, I'm sorry, I missed that earlier. So yes, I would like to move to amend the meeting minutes to include that Commissioner Clay was the one that nominated Commissioner Brown for the vice chair position, not myself. I just asked Commissioner Brown if they would accept the nomination.
Oh, I see. Okay. With that small change, then we can revisit the minutes of the meeting and consider the minutes as now amended to say that Commissioner, what's Ann's last name?
Clay.
Clay.
Yeah, nominated Cliff Brown for vice chair. Shannon?
So Chair Jackson, I would need a motion, a second, and then
Yes.
a vote.
Yes.
I would
So
make
that is
a
a-
motion to amend.
Yeah, you moved to amend the.
I second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that the meeting minutes from the August meeting be amended to show the correction as stated. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries and the minutes have been accepted as amended. Thank you for that correction, Jonathan. Okay, seeing or hearing nothing else to come before the commission this evening, then we stand adjourned. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, good
See you next
evening.
month.